Hey guys, Demetrius here. All right, we're going to kick off a podcast pretty quick. Main thing is Jesse and I are going to be having a fun conversation about what's changed in Pro Pool. Match Room, there's a lot of good things going on. There's more money in the game. The competition's also tougher. What does that mean for the road of the Pro Pool player in 2025? First, though, I'm joined by Charlie, one of my students, who wanted to share a little bit about his bootcamp experience training with me. And then finally, in the middle, I'm going to insert, I'm excited, Nate Tam edited a little commercial for me for my online group coaching that I'm doing with Slate Billiard Club. So in the middle of it, it's only 45 seconds or 50 seconds, so check it out. Don't skip it because I want to shout out to Nate. He managed to make this mug salvageable. So look for that in the middle. All right, let's get going. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Day 3 at Minnesota Pool Boot Camp. I'm here with Charlie from North Carolina, and we have just completed 3 days. How's it going, Charlie?
A little tired, but it has been a fantastic 3 days. It's been really, really awesome. We've had this schedule. I first heard about you on the podcast back maybe 8 months ago, I guess, and scheduled with you a couple of months ago, and came. I've been really looking forward to it. I've had kind of an interesting pool career. I started shooting when I was 11. I'm 62 now, so I've hit 50 years, and was what I described to you, probably kind of a ball banger until I, really got into it back a few years ago and really got serious, became a student of the game and wanted some more advanced instruction. I'd never really had any instruction before. I'd looked at books and, of course I grew up in the age pre-internet and was looking for somebody to kind of take me to another level. But even after 50 years of shooting, I thought I kind of knew a lot, and handicapped a 7, 8, and 8 ball, 9 ball APA. So I've done okay, but just wanted to see to kind of learn what I didn't know. You can't know what you don't know, and so that's sort of what led me to you when I started listening to your podcast and saying, "Hey, this guy really has a in-depth level of understanding the pool," and it's been really profound what you've taught me over the last few days. It's really been amazing. I've learned more in 3 days than I could have learned playing the next 10 years, and
And
I've
yeah,
discovered
it's
stuff that I've never even thought about before.
and isn't it's weird, and so I appreciate it because I want to get into like what it is because I want you to spill the secrets. Like I'm not trying to keep secrets from people. It's not like I want to hide behind some kind of paywall and protect. Like what? No, it's like it's weird to me that because you get it and I get it, but for people that haven't done the boot camp, it would be weird. It's like, well, wait a minute, isn't there all the information out there on videos, and isn't all the information already out there? So like, what is it that he's teaching that's so secret that I need to go to train with him, and why can't I just get it for free online? Like, what's you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, so
why is it like? Are there hidden secrets here, or why would you need to come here to learn anything?
well, I would say hidden secrets, but there are things that you don't get on the internet. Like I've watched YouTube. I started watching YouTube videos during COVID, as everyone else did, and I've watched a lot of hours of YouTube videos, and it's you get kind of basic information, but you don't get in depth information to where you're actually working on it and doing it, going, that's how it works. And the big thing for me is like I've watched people who are really, really good and even like, professional events on YouTube, watching people move the ball and like very precisely ending up and able to play the next ball. And I could generally do that, but I would miss those target areas a lot. And, I could run racks, but I couldn't really consistently run racks. And what you pointed out at first was essentially I'm just kind of hitting the ball too hard. And I've never thought about that. And I'm watching other people, like there are other people that hit the ball way harder than I do. So I thought I had pretty good control. And you've just, shown me how to control the cue ball so much better than what I could control it before.
Yeah, and you know what the funny part is that it's so to say I was hitting the balls too hard.
the anybody listening could, well, just hit them softer. But the problem is you have to earn the right to hit the ball softer in a number of ways. One way that you can hit the ball softer is to develop your timing. And did we develop your timing?
Oh, absolutely. My timing completely
So-
changed so much better.
So the cue efficiency, the more efficiently you use your cue, the softer you can swing. And we've improved his cue efficiency. Another way that we can allow it, you have to earn the right to hit the ball softer, is by getting the right angles on shots. Because when you get the right angles, then you don't have to force the cue ball and you're allowed to hit the ball softer. So if somebody was getting flat angles on a ball and they have a bad angle, they don't get to shoot softer. They have to muscle the ball. So if somebody's getting bad angles on balls and muscling balls around the table, telling the person to hit it softer isn't the right answer, because it's not that they're choosing to hit hard. They're putting themselves in spots where they have to hit hard. And so then you could say, okay, so then just develop your timing and get more angles, and then you can hit softer. But even that doesn't help, because in order to be able to play for bigger angles, you have to know how to control the cue ball on those bigger angles, where it's going to go and how to control the direction and speed. And we got better at so part of this is all by developing your timing and then developing a comfort level with those different cue ball tools.
Right.
Then you can play for bigger angles, and then you unlock the ability to move your cue slower and calmer.
And that's been the amazing thing to me, is just how smooth and rhythmic I've been able to stroke the ball. I haven't had to hit the ball hard the entire time we've been here.
We've played a lot of Scotch doubles, have we not?
Yeah, we have.
How many times have I told you to either hit a ball hard or draw a ball back a long way?
Never.
I don't do that, do you?
And it's been amazing, because night one, when I showed up and we shot for a couple hours, I was just, pounding around the table, high inside to take it 3 rails. And, it disappeared after we started working on all this.
It was, guys, watching him on night one when we were just hitting balls before we started training. Now, to be fair, you have a powerful stroke, you have good firepower, you have a lot of draw. I can tell you've put in the work on your fundamentals and you've developed a big tool set. But I always say the first half of your pool career is building the whole tool set. And then the second half of your pool career is putting away half those tools and only using the good ones. So you had that big tool set with the power game. And when you were playing 8-ball, you were using your power game. Like, you used more power draws in the couple racks of 8-ball we played Tuesday night compared to what we've done in Scotch doubles over the last 3 days. And that's fine. That's okay. That's not a problem. That's why you're here. Because but you have to have alternatives. So we built some alternatives. And one of my favorite memories, and you'll know, there was that shot that we worked on where you're cutting the ball kind of thin down the rail using different spins. It was funny because we worked on that shot and you're like, you weren't really comfortable with it. You don't normally play for that angle. You don't normally like that shot. And after working on that shot, the very first rack, we looked at a 6-ball run and 9-ball. And that shot came up 4 times in a 6-ball run. Yeah. And so the funny part is, this shot, and I call it, I have my core shots, whatever I go over. It's like, these shots come up constantly, but they don't come up unless you know them. And so the shots that I have, I mean, we can look at the board and see, soft rolls and soft stuns and different move shots that we worked on and everything. Once you know those shots, that's all you use. But most people, it's not that they're secret, but most people just don't like them or aren't comfortable with them, or maybe they don't have the tip accuracy or the knowledge or the comfort level with those shots. And then they just use shots that they know, which they require more power. They have less cue ball precision, and then it just leads to like a series of kind of semi-recovery smash shots that don't quite lead to a rack in a repeatable way.
Well, that's really a good point that you make too about the recovery shots. Like, looking at my game before I came here, like, I had a lot of recovery shots in games that I shot. And we didn't really have many recovery shots, if you think. I mean, there were a few times we got out of line. It's going to happen. But they weren't major recovery shots.
Well, we played a few sets of Scotch doubles 8-ball, and I think we won the 8-ball versions. We won 5-1 and 5-3. And it's funny, I've talked about momentum in the past. We lost the first game and then won 5 in a row to win 5-1. The second set, we lost the first 3 games, then we won 5 in a row to win 5-3. That shows how swingy and momentum he was. But of the 10 racks that we won, it was like never any power and never a hard shot. I would ask him after the set, did you ever have a hard shot? And he'd be like, no, they were all easy. I'm like, did you ever have to do anything with the cue ball that was hard? He's like, no, that was all easy. And yeah, okay. So
another thing too is that before I came, I'll guarantee you, every match I played, I would end up hooking myself at some point during those matches. And we've shot for 2 days and we've never hooked a ball.
No, that's crazy. Um, I'm trying to think. I'm like, man, I'm thinking about like maybe, I guess, I guess why would you, why would you want to? I knew a guy, Jimmy Wedge was ranked as high as fifth in the world in Minnesota back in the '90s. He was our top player in Minnesota, and I remember he was watching a couple of pool players play, and somebody like hooked themselves or left themselves really bad. I forget, maybe like over a ball. And Jimmy looked at me and he said, "I don't understand. Why would he put the cue ball there?" And it was funny because his cue ball control was so good that I don't think he understood that for some people they didn't mean to put the ball there, but some people just lose their cue ball.
Yeah,
And so
right.
Jimmy was such a good cue ball guy that it just didn't even. It's like he couldn't even comprehend. He's like it was like their choice. Like, well, why would you put it there anyway? Okay, so one thing we could easily bust all out of time because we're both a little spent, but to refocus. So we've built out your toolbox so that you could improve your timing and improve your toolbox so that you could play a softer touch game and avoid hitting balls hard. What else? Is there anything else? Secrets? Like, what are the secrets? I mean, I don't know. Spill the beans. Wreck my boot camp by telling everyone everything for free. What else? What did you learn that you? I don't know.
Uh, I guess that's kind of the main thing. Can you sort of refresh? I am a little bit burned,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
what would be?
Well, I mean, so like, I guess I don't disagree. Like in the end, like you could say it at a really high level. Like I just showed you how to play pool better, and it's
Right,
like
right,
so then
yeah.
it's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, and then so specifically, let's just I'll tell you what I try to do. What I try to do with you. You tell me if we accomplish this. Um, I said that we wanted to improve patterns, and then
Which we
in
did.
order to do that, we would have to improve your cue ball. And in order to
We
improve
did.
your cue ball, we would have to do three things. We'd have to fill in cracks in your knowledge. We would have to build your technique so that you could execute. So knowledge of how these shots work and why we prefer them and how to control them. The technique in terms of speed and tip accuracy, so tip and timing, the speed control and the tip accuracy to be able to execute these shots. And then time to develop a comfort level. I said knowledge, technique, and time. And so I said patterns, cue ball, and then building the cue ball takes knowledge, technique, and time. So I try to work with you on knowledge. I try to work with you on your tip and your timing, and I try to work with you a little bit on your technique. And then we try to put in enough time to develop some comfort with these shots and with the timing. And so I try to build those three things to build out your cue ball and give you some cue ball tools that would allow you to play better patterns. And then as we build your cue ball tools, then I try to teach you the pattern play of how to put those together to minimize the difficulty of the racks.
Right.
That was kind of my goal. How
Yeah, and
would you say we did all that?
Yeah, absolutely, we accomplished all of that, and it's given me a good tool set to go back, and clearly I need to spend more time, but you've given me the basics to take home, and given me a good list of things to work on, and quite honestly, I think I told you at breakfast this morning. I mean, there are a few of these that, like, I understand the concept and I can hit it. I'm not terribly consistent sometimes with a little bit of what we're doing, but I can see that easily I can become consistent. And with the few things I feel a little uneasy about, when I master those, and I don't think it's going to take long to do it, it's really, really going to elevate my game. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and so the only thing I'd say to that is I think your game is elevated already. And it will, but so I'm not disagreeing. You say it will elevate your game. The only thing is, for somebody listening, they might be like, "Ooh," so he's banking on the fact that someday in the future this will pay off. But I think
It's
what you're
already
saying
paying
is,
off.
I think what you're saying is it will continue to elevate your game.
Yes.
But would you think that you're playing better? Do you think you could beat yourself from 3 days ago right now?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
Okay,
No doubt. No doubt.
so in the end, guys, there are no secrets in pool, but there are certain roads that people don't like to go down that are uncomfortable for people, or there's things that people don't apply correctly. Timing, tip accuracy, the way they play their cue ball, the way they manage their angles, the way they create targets. People don't create, would you agree I create targets differently than most people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so and it's not black and white where you know your cue ball or you don't, or you play good patterns or you don't. It's incremental. And 500, 300 Fargos play patterns different than 500 Fargos. 500 Fargos play patterns different than 600s. I'm a hell of a player, and I play patterns a little bit different, and it's just better. It's just good, so that's it. It's not about you're bad and you need me to get better, or you need me to get good. It's not bad and good, but there's levels and levels, and so that's it. There's just levels, and there's no secrets. It's just incremental improvement on and people say the foundation of pool is fundamentals, and that every incremental improvement. And we did, smoothing out the timing of your swing is definitely kind of relates to fundamentals and the wrist and all that. But I think the biggest thing is I'm incrementally helping people develop their cue ball, developing their speed, developing their patterns, developing their shot selection, and we did some other stuff. We did some safeties, and we did some braking, and we did
Right, right.
some good stuff there too,
Yeah, it was
right?
good stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. It was fun. It's been a long 3 days, but it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and it was, and I appreciate you, Charlie. I appreciate everybody that comes out and trains. So if you've trained with me, I want to thank you. If you're thinking about training with me, I want to thank you. I appreciate it. I couldn't do this without you. But this one was very fun. So thank you, Charlie.
Good time. Good time. Good memories too.
Yeah, until we meet again.
Thanks.
Hey everyone, Demetrius Gelatis here, and I've got Jesse Engel returning. It's been a while. How's it going, Jesse?
It has been a while. It's going pretty good. How about for yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. So you are you're not at home today. You're where?
Yeah, still out in Pennsylvania currently. We're like just north of Philly, probably, I don't know, it's like 15, 20 miles, but we were
So
we came
you went to the US Open. When did you leave for the US Open, Jesse?
so we left Minnesota on what would that been? August 15th? Yeah, August 15th. I think it was a Friday. And then our plan was to check into the Harrah's in Atlantic City on Sunday, the day before the tournament started. And then on Saturday night, we checked into a hotel
Why
in,
don't you explain who we is? Maybe
oh yeah, well, I was out here with, or still out here, but yeah, it was myself and Brianna, my girlfriend. So we were on our way out here, and then she was pregnant, and she was, at the time, she was just shy of 33 weeks being pregnant. And when we checked into our hotel here, like just north of Philly, her water punctured in the elevator on our last trip up to the room for the night. So then we had to, kind of do like an emergency thing there. They came and picked her up, brought her to the hospital like 15 minutes away. And then essentially we just had to like kind of keep the baby in for another week or so until they, because 34 weeks is kind of like the time where I guess the experts have decided that the baby's better off outside than in. So we just kind of, did that, and then and then delivered on August 25th. So then our baby's been in the NICU ever since. So totally
yeah.
fine.
So
Everything's healthy. There's no issues, but it's just standard procedure. They gotta, when they're young and they're premature, they gotta learn to eat on their own, and just takes them a little time. So
so basically, you guys went out there. This was supposed to be your last travel. This was supposed to be your last trip before you guys were stuck at home with the newborn. So you guys
yeah,
go out to Philly for the U.S. Open to play at Atlantic City, and then she basically goes into early. She has to have the child early, and because it's 34 weeks or whatever, it's in intensive care for like what, it's been 3 weeks now. So basically they just supervise, right? Everything's okay, but they just want to make sure it's like around the clock
yeah.
coverage and that kind of thing. So basically, instead of going out and having a last tournament, a last trip, and then coming home and having the baby, you're out there playing this tournament. She's going into labor and in a high risk labor. And meanwhile, even after the birth, now you're stuck out there in Philly for 3 weeks because you can't leave. It's like Hotel California out there.
It's pretty wild. I mean, obviously we didn't plan for any of this. We did, you can't, how can you plan for it, right? So basically it was, I mean, once she got to the hospital, it was in a position where, they were like, hey, like we want to hold, if best case scenario is we want to hold you off until, it was a Monday that they wanted to deliver. And that would have, which ended up putting her in the hospital for, about just shy of 7 days before she could deliver. And then, keep her a little bit of aftercare too, because you stay in an extra day or two or whatever it is. And then, yeah, so it's just kind of a wild thing. So,
Well, I'm glad I
yeah,
caught you while you're out there like kind of getting a little stir crazy in the hospital, in the hotel room and all that. So okay. Well, meanwhile, nothing really exciting on my end. I did have a fun trip where I went down to the Texas Open. It's a long, I drove down there, stayed with little Chris. So thank you, little Chris, for putting me up. And then played the event. It was fine. And then afterwards, I actually did a boot camp in Beaumont, Texas. That was fun. So hung out with Carl and Chad for a few days. So thank you guys for having me over. And then made the 19-hour drive home. And yeah, nothing too crazy, but back to
Nice.
work now, back to work. So
Must be nice just go to a pool tournament, not have to deal with anything crazy, you know?
yeah, oh yeah. It's real tough to win matches when you don't have
Yeah,
a girlfriend going into labor. Like
yeah.
what is this, some kind of joke? Yeah, your kids were probably feeding themselves and taking care. They weren't in intensive care. Okay, I gotcha. So Jesse, this what kind of prompted me to want to have this is that you went to the U.S. Open and you are no stranger to the U.S. Open. How many U.S. Opens do you think you've played in your life?
Gosh, it must have been probably this has got to be like 7, 8
I was
now.
going to say 5 or 10. Yeah, I would guess somewhere between 5 and 10. And the first U.S. Open you played was like 2009. Does that sound about right?
It was 2010.
2010.
Yep.
And so you've seen pool. So some of the things that we want to talk about today, let's just let people know what we're going to be talking about. We'll see if we cover it all. Is the state of pool today, the career path of pool today, what might lie ahead in 5 or 10 years with pool, and then a little bit, if we have time, I have some ideas about some interesting other musings I won't get into yet in case we don't get to it.
Okay.
But basically, my my premise is that like I believe that the state of pool has changed substantially and more than once. I think that there was a big change between 2010 and 2017, 2018. I think that there was another big change between 2018 and today. And so I have some ideas on what's changed, but I want to talk about like what's changed, what we, and what is that, and then what does that mean for the pool players that are trying to, either the current players that are trying to make a living or the future generation. So why don't those are my kind of the way I wanted to frame it. But from your point of view, what have you seen change, or how much change have you seen from this year's U.S. Open compared to 5 years ago, compared to 15 years ago? Tell me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a couple different categories to break that down. Obviously, there's like the player experience, right? Like which involves the skill set of the players, kind of just like how the tournaments ran, and then of course the other end, which is like the quote unquote like business or the show side of things, right? So I'll just start with like the players or the players' perspective. I mean, I've always felt like the U.S. Open was a pretty well-ran tournament, no matter even when it was back, at what was it the Chesapeake Conference Center? I think that's where, yeah. Like I thought it was pretty well ran. At least it was structured with, I mean, playing times, whatever. It felt pretty prestigious to me, just because of the arena. Like there was always, a bunch of people watching, even if they weren't directly watching yours. So it was pretty good. I mean, it that was back when pool was still, rack your own without the template rack. So I guess it was a different game. So maybe that was just something I didn't really like pay attention to at the time. But overall, I mean, I felt like it was still a pretty good tournament back then. Um, and then as well, like the promotion of it or the business side of it. I mean, obviously, I wasn't involved in the too much on that, right? So it's hard for me to make too many comments, but it just seemed like even though everybody kind of knew that was like the big tournament here, it was probably pretty hard for like outside anyone that was like observing pool from an outside perspective to really understand that because it just wasn't really treated like it was a big event in my opinion. And then I guess we'll just jump to today, which is, nowadays, or I guess the other thing I should say is when you used to go to the US Open, you could comfortably go there and know that like there's a chance you're going to get a pretty tough draw, right? Where there's 10 to 15 guys that if you draw them, you're like, all right, well, I'm going to have to get pretty fortunate to win this set. But then, guys who play like around our speed, there was like another maybe 30 to 40 players where, yeah, they could beat you in the set, but you still probably had a slight edge on them. And then there was, another percentage of the field, whatever that would be, where if you drew them, like you're probably just it's not a buy, but it's the closest thing to it. You know what I mean? Like they're
So
gonna put up
let's
a
let's
fight.
uh let's just help people because they might not know your speed really well and they might not know what you mean. So let's just make a few buckets of ability level. Say in
Sure.
2010, say using today's Fargo rate as a guide, let's just say like what buckets, like what would you consider to be a match where it's like, oh, I got a really tough draw. This is going to be a super tough one to win. Would you consider like 800 plus, 790 plus, something like that? Or where
No,
would
I
you?
I would say honestly, I would say like even like high 600 plus because guys that are like floating right around that 700 Fargo rate. I mean, they're still very capable of playing very good sets, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would say like around the 700 mark would be when I was playing full time, you know, it would be like, all right, these guys are capable, you know, they can put together a tough set.
Okay.
Um,
So you've got the bucket of this is going to be a tough match. That's the
yep.
one bucket. But then what's the bucket of people that you said, oh man, this is a really bad draw. I'm going to have to get fortunate to win. What was that bucket?
Sure. Yeah, that would be like probably if you're comparing it to today's Fargo, I would say today's Fargo of like, yeah, like a 760 plus, a
Okay.
770 plus, maybe somewhere in there.
Okay. So yeah. So drawn, yeah, even 770, 780. So basically, so you've got a few buckets. You've got let's just call it 775. So you got the 775 plus bucket, which is like, man, this is going to be a really tough match. I'm an underdog. It's going to be tough to pull out. Let's see what I can do. Then you've got like the 700 to 775 bucket where it's like, all right, um, I got chances. I might even like my end of it, but man, this is going to be a tough set. And then
Yep.
you've got the bucket of guys that are like, and that bucket might even start at 680, 690. And then you've got the bucket of guys that are below 680, which for you, you're around 750 Fargo. So if you draw somebody that's in the mid to lower sixes or below, that's a good first round draw at the US Open. So three buckets. You've got the guys that are, we'll even call it 760 plus. Tough draw, tough match. 680 to 760 is the middle bucket where it's like, okay, testy first match, but not the worst. But and then a versus a draw that's like, okay, I like my end of it. I should be able to get through this match and get warmed up. Okay, so in 2010, out of 256 players at the U.S. Open, how many people were in each bucket?
Yeah, just spitballing here, but I mean, I would say that the top bucket, there was probably I, maybe 25 players,
That's what I was
which
thinking. Yeah,
which was like at that time, I mean, they did have a 256 player field one of the years. I think they dropped it back down after that. But yeah, so maybe 10% of the field to up to like 20% of the field was, or getting close to high teens was like elite players.
yeah. So the way that would look for people that weren't around, so you'd have like back in 2010, you'd have Shane at the top, you'd have Alex Pagulayan at the top, you'd have Dennis
Mika,
McCullough at the top, and then you drop and you'd have a bunch of guys that were really really tough. You'd have some European guys and you'd have some Filipino guys and you'd have another, like Jesse says, another 20 guys that were like, upper 700 or just knocking on the door of 800. And then and then that was kind of like that was kind of like your top bucket. Yeah, you'd have, your Mika Immonen would be like and I mean, there's a reason why Darren Appleton and Mika Immonen and Neil Spann, they were like, there was like 20 guys like that. And then you had like 3 or 5 guys that were at the very top, like Alex and Shane and Dennis O'Connell. Was that sound
yeah,
about right?
yeah, definitely.
And then you had a lot of people in that, then you have how many people in the middle bucket, like the 690 to 760 bucket?
Yeah, with no like exact thing, I would say on the low end, it was probably, and again, another 25 to 30. And then
Maybe
it
50.
scanned through, yeah, maybe 50 on like the best year where there was like, okay, it's a tough field this year, which is kind of crazy, So and then obviously the rest would be in the lower. And like a good comparison to this, what I would say would be if you wanted to see like what those percentages look like, it's just like go scan through what the players list looks like at Turning Stone. And that's like percentage breakdown pretty close to what it used to be at the US Open. Like there's so many players on that list that you've probably not really heard of. And if you have, they're like local people that are, yeah, they might play okay, but they're what I would consider to be good draws in a pro tournament, Doesn't mean they're
Yeah.
not capable,
And
but
one big shocking thing was that if you look at the final 64 of the US Open in 2010, you might see 55 US flags out of 64. And now
yeah.
you might see 4 or 5 instead of 55. So
Hmm.
okay. So just to recap then, 256 players, you had, we'll just call it like 5 elite players that might win the tournament, or that were high, probable to win a tournament like that. You had 20 guys that were like Mika and Darren Appleton that were like in that second bucket, or they're still kind of like in that top bucket where it's like really tough, 770 plus. Then you had maybe another 40 or 50 guys that were like 690 plus. And then that means you had like 180 guys that played anywhere from, mid 600s down. Now, what would you say the buckets? So you were just out there this year.
Yep.
Tell me about this year. What do you think the current breakdown would be?
Okay, so keep in mind my experience going this year was like I literally woke up at the hospital, zipped over there like for a match and then played terrible and had to turn around. So like I didn't spend a lot of time around the tournament. but obviously I was kind of scanning around just to see who was there and get a feel for the players. What I gathered from like what I know is like today's top players and anybody that's like even Fargo rate, like my Fargo rate and above, I would say there had to be like 80 players there at least, maybe closer to 100 that are 750 and above. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what it felt like just looking around.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then
So
yeah,
hang on, but let's keep the buckets consistent. You said the top bucket was like
sure,
760
sure.
plus. So how many
So
out of 256? How many people do you think would be in the 760 plus bucket?
760. I mean, it's probably close to that 80 mark, honestly.
Yeah, I was going to say at least 50. It went. So remember before we were talking, we said that it was like originally it was like 25. Now we're saying probably closer to 80. So
Let
okay,
me
so
just
like a third of the field is like in that category of like, man, it's going to be hard to even win a set off these guys. Yep.
Sorry, the hotel phone was ringing.
No problem. So you got a third of the field, 80 guys that are in that like 770, plus bucket where it's like, how do you even win a set off? These guys are great strikers, full-time players, used to the equipment, all that stuff. Then you've got, how about the next tier of guys that are like 680, 690 to that 760, where it's like live but tough. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a small window, but I like to because I don't know everybody's Fargo, but I would say, there's probably still like another at least 30 to 40 of those guys.
Oh,
And
I would think more. I would think that there's got to be like, well, because then the last question is how many people are below 680.
oh yeah, I
And it's
suppose
like,
there is I don't even this is bad, I don't even know this. Was the field like 256 or was it half
yeah,
that?
yeah.
'Cause I was thinking like it was probably half that.
Oh,
So
I thought it was
maybe,
256.
yeah, maybe it is. I should know that, right? If I signed up, but I just don't
So
pay attention.
I would assume that you have so originally the split was 25, 50 in the middle bucket, and then like the rest, like whatever that is, like 180 in the last bucket. Here, I
Okay.
think it would be probably like 80, and then I think you probably have 120 guys that are like 680 plus, and then 50 guys that are below 680. I think that's so just percentage wise, instead of 10%, 20%, 70%, 10% top tier, 20% second bucket, 70% lower bucket. Now we've got something like 33% top bucket, 50% middle bucket, and then like 17%, below 680. I think that that's reasonable.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's probably pretty accurate.
okay. The things that I've seen, so it's not just the strength of it's not just the top players, the number of, and then of course the other thing is like the number of guys where it's almost, there are guys that are almost impossible with a set off. Like for example, Shane, I know he's not winning everything these days. He's not like winning every tournament, although he won the Texas Open, he won the Iowa Big Dogs, whatever, so he's still, and he got to the finals in Florida, didn't he, against Aloysius. So it's like
Yeah.
he's still playing good pool, okay. But the point is that back in 2010, it was like Alex, Shane, Dennis Urcullo. There was like 3 to 5 guys that were like, you draw them in a tournament. I'll tell you what, man, I've never beat Alex a set in a tournament. And Shane, I've never beaten him a set in a tournament on a big table. I sniped him on a bar table and I sniped some sets off him playing, whatever, $100 sets at Jimmy's or something. But I've never like beat him the guy's beat me like 8 or 9 times on big tables where I've never won a set off the guy. He's real tough, man. And so there are guys that are just so tough that it's hard to even win a set off of. Like, and so the number of guys like that in 2010 was like 3 to 5. There was like 3 to 5 guys where I just felt like, man, it's hard to even find a road to victory. Now, man, there's a lot of players. There's a lot of players where it's like really hard to even find a path. The number of guys that are like almost impossible for me to take a set off of. Like once somebody's above 850, like once somebody's over 810 Fargo, like, it's really, really hard to win a set. Like, I mean, the guys in the 780s and 790s are very, very good players, but they can play bad sets and they can have sets where they're not raining racks and they give you chances at the table and they don't always like, but man, once you get to that, I don't know, obviously it's incremental, right? Whether it's 800 or 815, but somewhere around 800 to 815, there comes a point at which it's like, I just can't really compete in a race to 11 or I guess even a race to 9 is pretty tough. And the number of
Right.
guys like that in 2010, it was like 3 to 5. And now I feel like it's probably like 40 or 50. There's probably 40 guys that I'm like almost drawing that against. That's the big difference, I think, is that in the past, I felt like I felt like I could win matches where even if I was a little bit of an underdog, I mean, it's the US Open, right? You don't figure you're going to be the
Yeah.
favorite in every match. But like, I felt like I was live in a lot of sets, unless I was playing one of the 3 to 5 guys at the very top. And now there's like 30, 40, 50 guys where I feel like, all right, well, let's see who I play on the B side. I don't know. You play a little stronger than me, but just you kind of see where I'm coming from.
For sure, yeah. That is kind of how it feels, man. And well, the other thing that makes that really difficult too is that I understand why they do it, but like the fact that like it is a seeded tournament based on like the WNT rankings. So like even let's say that there's a guy who has I mean I don't know what like that Lucas, right? Like whatever his
Yeah,
Fargo
yeah.
rate is. But like at one time I remember looking at that kid's Fargo rate. It's probably like a year and a half ago and he was like a 730 and I was just like I haven't played pool seriously in like 10 years and I have 0% chance to beat this kid. You know, like he's just playing out of his mind. And I'm like, how many of those kids are there now that have a Fargo rate that's like lower than me that just play like 40 points better than me? Like I don't really know. But when you think about the fact then they're seeded, it's like if when you're just like a shot taker, you have 0% chance to be ranked because you're not traveling the circuit, right? So then it makes it extra hard because you're not gonna like play one of them and then get like it's like no, it's one after the next after the next. So it's a I mean you get it. So
Yeah, so for
it's
people that don't
tricky.
know, seeding is something where they spread out the top players so that they don't play each other in the first round or two. So they spread out the top players so that the top players don't have to play each other. What that means is if you're not a top ranked player, odds are you're going to be playing a top player, if not first round, second round, and it's going to be a really tough road. So it's kind of funny because you can't play anywhere locally without giving up a huge handicap. But then you want to go play the best players in the world, and it's almost like you have to give them a handicap. It's really weird. But okay, there's an argument for seeding. That's not what I'm interested in. So then I've got the question, Jesse. Why do you think pool has gotten so tough? Like, why did this happen? Like, why does the depth of the field? I mean, the number of players that you could barely win a set off went from like 3, 4, 5 to like, 40 or 50. Like, what happened? Well, how would you explain it?
Sure. Well, the only way that I could really explain is that pool, well, specifically American pool with obviously like the 9 ball and stuff, that has become so much more popular in the other countries now, right? And they've I don't follow. I was just thinking about what I heard the other day on that Joe Rogan podcast when Federer was on there for the second time. I I would like to check this out, but I thought I heard him say that there was like in whatever city in Vietnam, there was like 2,000 separate pool rooms in one city, which is like insane to think about. You know, like is there 2,000 like actual good pool rooms in America? You know, like think it through. You know, so if there's that much pool in one large city in Vietnam, and that's also happening in, Saudi Arabia, all the other, Asian countries, and I mean Europe, we know that they take their pool very seriously over there. It's just breeding these top players, right? So by the time like they get over here, they're a much higher level because they're in constant action, right? So that's what I think's happened to the overall like caliber of play. And now with Matchroom like creating this platform for all these people to kind of play pool consistently, they just kind of drip over into the tournaments. It's the same thing that we saw like in all the the bar table tournaments in America that were 5 to 10,000 added about what 6, 7, 8 years ago, where you would roll in the weekend and all of a sudden like Alex, Shane, Dennis, there was like 10 guys there that would never show up to a bar table tournament in their life, but they had to because that's where the money was at, right? And the same
Mm.
thing's happening now in what we consider our like American pro events because that's all we have, and I don't know.
Yeah, like
That's kind of what you're asking.
the
Like,
Texas Open attorney. So
yeah,
you basically, if I was to recap your point, is that it's the number. So we've got a few levers, okay, that change things. One is the number of participants. And so as obviously as we've gone from, in the 80s and 90s, it was primarily United States competing. In 2000, we started getting a lot of representation from, of course, from Europe. The Philippines, were involved in the 80s, 90s. Europe was involved in the 90s and 2000s. And then it really went worldwide, and the number of competitors from around the I mean I've yeah so it went worldwide, so the number of competitors, the number of entrants to the contest of good pool has increased by quite a bit. The other point I'd like to bring up is that I think that there's two other big contributing factors. So one of them was YouTube, And I've kind of talked about this before, but like, boy, YouTube really blew up between 2005, 2006. I mean, it was around before then, but it got to be where between 2005 and 2010, you could really start watching the best players in the world. You could watch Shane races to 100 against Corey, and you could watch or his sets against Alex, and you can start watching the top players more than just occasionally on some grainy VHS tape. And so I think and Shane came along and really played the game well on diamond tables. And I think what happened was like Shane really burst into prominence in 2006, 7, 8. And if you look at when play jumped, like to me, I think somewhere around 2015 to 2018 was when we really saw it blow up with European champions. Before then in 2012, 2013, there was still a lot of good European players, and there was a couple at the top. But Shaw came on the scene, at Clinty Kachi, Joshua Filler, Feder Gorst, and FSR. I mean, all of these guys hit around the same time. Albin Ocean, they all hit in that 2016, 2017 range. And I think that what it was is that if you look at 2006, 2007, 2008, when everybody was watching pool on YouTube for the first time, fast forward 10 years, all those 10-year-old, 8 and 10 and 12-year-old boys that were playing pool, all of a sudden, now they're 10 years older. And so they were able to learn a lot more quickly. And I think that just the visibility of top pool on people's computers really made that, it gave people a clean image of what the game should look like that just wasn't available. Like when you were learning and trying to learn pool, you were going to the local pool room and playing guys, trying to look at how the local players played. You weren't learning from the best of the world. So I think that's one contributing factor too.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and I mean, obviously I watched a lot of pool on YouTube as well when I was younger, but it definitely wasn't to the extent that there is now. Like, almost every week it feels like you can, throw on a live stream where it's literally that like 30 of the best players in the world, and you get to watch them. They're all, good at different things, right? But back then it was just like old AccuStats matches, right? So there's like so much you could pick up in the same race to 9.
Yeah, you weren't watching Shane at his prime. Yeah.
Right.
And then there's another thing that I wanted to kind of mention that I think I want to get this in the mix. It's not just the ability to watch top pool. Okay, so let's use an analogy. It's if I told you that you needed to get to Los Angeles from Minneapolis, or from Philadelphia. I forgot you're stranded. But I could tell you about the destination, and I could show you where the destination is. But it would be really also useful to give you driving directions of how to get from here to there.
Yeah.
Even if in 2006 and 7 and 8, you could watch some of the top players on YouTube, that would tell you what your game needs to look like. But it would not tell you how to put that game together. And so if you didn't know, the way that people used to do this is they would go to their pool room and play all the time and spar around with other players and just try their hardest and then play against the big tournaments locally and even regionally. And if you drew a guy that was like the state champion or something, it's like, this is a tough match. You draw a guy that's a 720 Fargo and it's like, he's one of the good players. And you play a guy like that once a year, twice a year, whatever. And that was kind of like the site. That's kind of how you did things. The problem is playing local tournaments on bar tables and occasionally playing a 700. That road does not lead you to 800 plus pool.
You're right.
The only road that leads to 800 plus pool, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll make this as a statement. You have to be a full-time player that's playing in all the international events where you're competing on a weekly basis against the best players in the world. I don't see a way that somebody's going to play. Like if somebody's played in their home state, even if they were the best player in the state and they played all the time and practiced all the time and won everything and played regional tournaments, I don't think there's any way that player gets to 800 without playing a full-time international schedule for several years. Would you agree with that?
Yep. Yeah, I would 100% agree with it. Won't go too much of a tangent, but even, you have your own story, but like where I got my Fargo to 750. The reason why that got that way is because I dominated locally and somewhat regionally, but then I played a good mix of like the international, pros in those tournaments. And that was good enough to lift my Fargo probably an extra, I'd say 20 to 30 points. But yeah, if you really wanted to get over 800, like you have to breathe pool every day. You can't
and
have
and,
anything else in your
and you have to play.
and be in competition.
You
Yeah.
have to be in full-time competition against other
Yeah.
800s. You can't exceed the level of your competition. So
Right.
if you're competing against 700s, you're not gonna get to 800. You need to be playing 800s. So
Correct.
so the point is that people didn't, even if people knew that, or maybe they knew that, or maybe they didn't know that, but most pool players were in their home states playing on in their local tournaments. Somewhere around, social media, I've thought about this an awful lot, guys. Not only did YouTube was a huge contributing factor to the lift and pool, but social media over the last 5, 6, 7 years, social media, especially post COVID, has been an enormous lift and pool, because in 2015, you could watch the top players on YouTube and you could see that's what I need my game to look like. But now, since 2020, more and more people have been posting their journeys and here talking about their tournament experiences and showing how they prepare and what drills they do and showing what they, whatever, talking about the matches and doing, like, people are just like, hey, here's the tournament, here's my tournament calendar, here's what's going on, here's the tournaments I play, here's the drills I do, here's the matches I'm playing, here's how you get there. And people, it's not just about how you physically play, it's about how you manage your career. Like, this is the road that leads there. And more people are looking at that and saying, oh, that's how you just go play these tournaments. And so this may sound obvious, but when I was, 20 years ago in Minnesota, people didn't know about the Texas Open. People didn't know about, people knew that the Derby City and the US Open existed, but that was like a universal way where it's like, I don't know. I mean, that's not really our scene, And so the people just kind of stayed in their pond. Whereas now it's like, no, guys, it's almost like the world has been notified that, hey, if you want to become a great, world-class pool player, you have to get out of your pond. And here's the pond you got to swim in, and you got to go to these tournaments, and you got to play these events, and you got to do this thing where you've got to have your tournament calendar of all the tournaments you're going to and how you're playing and matching up against these top players. And you got to be, it's like, so not only is the pool game physically demonstrated on YouTube that this is the game you need your game to look like, but I think the path of how to get there has been very illuminated, and more and more players are playing full time and chasing around these tournaments. So I think I think social media illuminating the path has been a big lift, and so specifically, I'll ask you two questions. One question is, what do you think of that statement? And the other question is, how many people do you think were full-time chasing the tournament trail in 2010? And how many people do you think right now are full-time chasing the tournament trail?
Yeah. I mean, I think the amount of people who were chasing that in 2010, are we doing international as players as well, or just
international?
Okay. Chasing it, I would say there probably was like 40 to 50. And I mean, realistic chances of, we knew that the bottom half really didn't have any chance of that. I mean, some of them are still kind of around today, sort of floating around, but they're not going to be the top tier player. But yeah, I would say it's probably around 40 to 50 that were consistently, traveling either over to the States if they were from out of the country, or they were kind of dominated on their own,
Yeah, there was 50 guys that were like, I'm going to take my shot at getting to the top. I'm going to play all the events. I'm going to travel around. I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to claw my way to the top. Like the John Moras and the Mika Eminens and all these things. Okay, so you had probably, I was thinking 50 to 100, but it's, again, it depends on, there might have been more players taking shots at these tournaments, but not on a consistent full-time basis. So let's call it 50. How many players do you think internationally are full-time traveling around and chasing tournaments right now?
Now with this answer, I'm just gonna let you know, like, I think I'm putting a number in here that I don't even think some of these guys are coming over to the States yet. I think they're playing full time.
Right, they might be in the
tough tournaments there,
and then you got, it's a little weird because do you count Hayball and all these things? Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, but actual, like, American pool, I would say that the number's probably somewhere between 200 and 300.
I was thinking 250. We're very close on this. Yeah. Yeah, there's probably, well, I was thinking about just the States alone. Just in the United States, there's probably like, like for example, I just played Devin Petit at the U.S. Open, not the U.S. Open, at the Texas Open. He's kind of playing full time. We have a friend here in Minnesota that's playing, kind of taking a shot. There's a guy I know that we know in Wisconsin that's kind of playing full time and taking a shot. So just in the U.S., there's you've got your Shane Wolfords and your Lucases and you've got your young guys like Sam Henderson I could name more, but there's probably like just from the U.S. there's probably like 20 guys that are, at least 20 guys, maybe 30 to 50 guys just in the US that are like trying to play all the tournaments and follow this path where it's like, okay, I'm going to go play all the tournaments. I'm going to do the thing. Here's the road that everyone says you got to go is you got to sign up for all the tournaments and claw your way to the top. I'm doing that road. There's probably
Yep.
30 to 50 guys from the US. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I'd agree.
And then for
Probably
the
that range.
Philippines, there's got to be 50 players in the Philippines that are doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in Europe, there's got to be 100 guys in Europe that are doing that, and there's got to be 100 guys in Asia. I mean, 250 plus, right?
Yeah,
Overall.
for sure.
So, okay, so that answers the question I asked, the literal question about how many players full time 2010 versus now. What about the question I was kind of just the point I was making about social media highlighting the road and what you have to actually do has been a huge uh, lift and pull in terms of getting people out of their pond and showing you've gotten more and more people on the fast track to the top. Would you agree that social media has played a big role in that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it has. I think hmm, I feel like that's affected, well, just based on the sheer amount of players, I feel like that's affected everywhere outside of the US a lot more. I think that it does have an effect here, but slightly different. I think what social media has done, at least the way that I've seen it in the past 5 to 10 years, is it has created a path for people in the States who knew they kind of loved pool, knew they wanted to travel, but it's just kind of created a path for them to sort of, build their own following to like help support their dream to like go do what they're going to do, right? As opposed to like show them like, oh, this is the path to become the best. Because at least the way I see it, there's like
Mm-hmm.
very different types of players in the US. And I'm not gonna say names of people because it's not like everybody's on their own journey, right? But it's very clear to me the players that truly want to be the best pool player. And then there's also people who it's like, well, they're playing pool. That's what they happen to do full time, but they're kind of like they're a storyteller in a sense, right? They just have like a fan base, which is totally fine too. I'm not knocking either way. It's just there's a clear difference between guys who truly believe they're going to be the best they can be and be maybe one of the best in the world versus the latter.
Yeah, we've talked about that in a podcast. If you didn't hear this one, I encourage you to check it out. Um, there was a podcast you and I did maybe 2 years ago that had to do with is pool objective or is it a meritocracy or is it more aesthetic based? I forget the name of it. I think it was called this pool of meritocracy. And so I encourage everyone to check it out. But basically, you're right. There's for every top player that's making a living in tournament winnings, there's probably more guys that are trying to make a living by becoming a pool influencer, where I'm going to play a full-time tournament schedule, make deep runs in tournaments, win against named players, but then I'm going to make my living sharing that journey with other people and getting support from other people that are fans of mine. And so I'm going to be, I'll be selling raffle tickets and signed cue balls and just kind of fundraising and being an influencer as much as a player.
Yeah.
And then of course, you've got where it blends into what I do is coaching. You've got it where it blends into where people are also trying to subsidize by being full time players, but also kind of teaching and running clinics or running exhibitions and things like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a side note, I mean, we won't go down that, but I think honestly, I think that nowadays everybody has to do a blend of that. That like you and I have talked about this stuff so many times, but even if you are trying to be the best, right? Like there's just no because of like how the tournament landscape has changed in the States where there's no like free or kind of like easy tournaments to go scoop up anymore on the weekends due to like the Fargo rate changes. So if you're not fundraising in some sense, whatever percentage that is for you as a person is kind of a, obviously it's a personal decision, but I mean, every pool player that plays full time has to do that because there's not enough out there, you know, to like keep you going unless you're the top five guys. So
So this is something that I wanted to get into now. So what we've kind of talked about is how pool has changed over 15 years. And it doesn't hit as hard as I want it to hit the people because most people that are listening to this have not played the US Open. And it's hard to explain to people the difference between walking into a tournament. So I want everybody to do a little thought experiment just so I feel like this might come through. I want you guys to picture going to the tournament. Like, what tournament do you most often play? Is there a weekly tournament in your local pool room, or a monthly event, or an event that they run once in a while? I want you guys to picture that tournament. Picture how many players are in that tournament, and picture how it feels showing up to that tournament and competing. Think about your best finish, how far you got, how you've won some matches, lost some matches, whatever. Now picture the next time you showed up to that tournament, if 20 people were Shane Van Boening, and how that would change how competitive you were and how that tournament experience went for you. That's what's happened it's hard to explain. It's just hard to explain what's happened in 10 years and since 2015 to 2025. Pool has elevated multiple times, not at the highest level. The top players are better. Shane, Filler, and Federer. Federer and Filler are the best I've ever seen. Shane is really, really good. One of the best of all time. I mean, but then you go down a notch and you go to like Carlo Beato and Aloysius
Yeah,
and Francisco and you go down to Jason Shaw and all of a sudden, at Clenti Kachi, and you've got like 50 guys now that are as good as anybody that played in the 90s that are in that. I don't know. It's okay. I give up. I'm not going to be able to explain to people what it's like. It's going to tournaments today versus going to tournaments 10 years ago. It's totally different. It's like showing up in your local tournament, showing up in a 32-man tournament and having 20 people be Shane Van Boening. And you're like, what happened? That's the closest thing. So that's the only thing I have time to explain to people. So here, I want to talk about something I hear a lot, and I'm probably going to lose some friends now. I'm going to lose some friends. But one thing I hear about all the time, and so I want to take a little sting out of this. I'm not being critical of this statement. I just think that there's a lot of people that are very, very far removed from the professional pool scene and that just play pool locally, and they play in their pool room, they play their leagues, they may have a table at home, and they follow pool. And so the first thing that they notice is that the purses at the match room is getting more money at the top spots than it used to be 20 years ago, and that there's more people making more money than there were 20 years ago. So from that viewpoint, they come to the conclusion, they make this statement, they say, man, pool's better than it's ever been. There's never been a better time to be a top player in pool. And they feel like, yeah, pool is growing, it's going the right way. And then they make the conclusion, they're like, you know what? And then there's other statements that these people make. They say things like, if you're one of the best in the world at something, you ought to be able to make a living like you do in golf or in other sports, and pool's on the road to be that way. And this is really going good for the game. And there's different statements in there and there's different assumptions baked in there. But I just wanted to address some of those things. So before I get ranting, what are your thoughts on some of those statements, Jesse? What comes to mind when you hear, what do you hear when people say there's more money in the top now than there's ever been? There's never been a better time to be a top player, and pool's growing, and it's good for the career path of pool. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. Obviously, there is more money at the top, and it definitely is a good time to be at the top. You see right now, like with what I can't remember the exact number, but the amount that like Federer had on his winnings for like this or in the past 14 months or something was like $500,000, was just pretty insane. But it's great for the top few guys, of course. For the career path of pool, we're gonna go there next. Obviously, like you, I probably very much disagree that makes it any better for the career path. If you want me to dive in, I can.
Yeah,
a little
why?
bit,
Why? Like, those sounds like contradictory statements. If there's more money at the top and more people are winning more money, why would this not be a better time to get into pool full time?
for sure. So if we're just gonna throw out a random number, if there's more money for the top 10 spots in pool, now there's what all that means is that there's more of the already top players that are going to compete for those 10 spots. So it's like the iron sharpens iron thing, right? The guys that are in the top 10 in 2012 to 2015 were very good at pool. They are basically like obsolete at this point. They have no chance to win because the level of play is that much higher. Yes, Shane's kind of
So give me some examples. Like, who are you thinking? I'm thinking about Mika Immonen.
Yep, exactly.
I'm thinking about Darren
Mika,
Appleton. I'm thinking about Carl Boyas. I'm thinking about who are like. There's a lot of guys from 2010 that were like. I mean, look at Corey Deuel. I mean, there's
even guys like, I mean, honestly, like just because I just saw him, Torsten and Ralph, like they are great players and incredible players, and they might make deep runs, but they just not at the consistent level.
And they were, and from 2005 to 2006, 7, Ralph, Thorsten, Mika Immonen, Darren Appleton. Darren Appleton won back-to-back U.S. Opens. Mika Immonen won back-to-back U.S. Opens. Ralph Thorsten was a world champion. Ralph Souquet, I know he won the U.S. Open. Is he a world champion? And these guys, of course, Ralph's getting a little bit older, but still, it's
even Alex.
Alex is a great
Bustamante, right? He was kind of at the tail end, but he still played pretty good. He was still always kind of deep there. I mean, I don't know how good or how active Dennis Orcola is right now, but my guess is if he was back here playing, these tournaments, he would not be in the top 8 very often. Just because of the nature of the game. But so I just think that it makes it that much harder to get into those top spots. And I have a deeper thought on, like, if you wanted to talk about the idea of if that were like how to actually change that, if there is a remedy for it. But I just don't foresee it happening.
So I'll kind of respond, and let me respond first, and we'll see where it goes. Here's what I think people don't get. And whenever I hear this, this is the part that's going to make me unpopular, is that there's 2 different ways to measure the success of how good pool is to make a living out of. One is the number of top players that are making a living, but the other one is the ratio, the percentage of players that try that make it. So in 2005, there was probably like 2 or 3 people that consistently made enough money playing pool to call it a living. There might be, on a given year, 5 guys that made enough to almost be making a living, but really 2 of them were consistently in those 5 spots. And then the other 3 spots flipped around to where if you only make a good living at the game 1 out of 5 years or 1 out of 10 years, it's hard to really call that a living. So there in 2005, you might have had 2 guys that were consistently getting in the top 5 spots. And then there was another 20 or 30 guys that would take turns having a good year every 4 or 5 years. So really, I would say that in 2005, probably there was like 2 guys making a living at the game. That was like a reasonable living. Call it 3. Well, now you've got, how many people now do you think are winning enough in prize money consistently year over year to where they could consider it a real career path?
Yeah. Just a guess, I would say it's probably closer to like the 15 range, might be close to 20. I mean,
let's call it 20. Let's call it 20. Okay. So we went from 2 people, 2, 3 people trying to, being able to kind of make a decent living to 20. And that sounds like, well, what a great time to get into pool. But remember what we talked about earlier. Before, there might have been 50 guys playing full time that were trying to fight their way into those 2 spots. And now there might be 250 guys that are full-time playing, trying to get their way into those 15 spots. And those are the people that are playing here. I mean, there's a lot of Filipinos and Europeans that don't go to all the international tournaments because it's actually more, Jesse, because here's the hell of it. Now that I think about it, we're only counting the people that are going around and playing all the matchroom events and traveling to the States and traveling internationally. The thing about it is, for every guy for every European that's traveling to all the matchroom events, there's probably another European that's just playing all the Euro Tour events that's not even good enough, that he's still playing full-time, trying to get good enough to chase all the international events. He's just not there yet. There's probably an army of 720 to 740 guys in Europe playing all the Euro Tour events full-time that are trying to eat their way into the matchroom scene. So it's almost like a minor league that exists that we're not even including. So the point is, if before you had 50 guys trying to get into 2 or 3 spots, now you've got 250 to 500 guys trying to get into 15 spots. And so what you're going to see is that while the actual, what do they call it? The static number, like the objective number, or the absolute, that's the word I'm looking for. The absolute number of players making a living at the game has increased. But the chances, if you're a full-time player, of eking into that, the ratio of people that succeed is probably about the same, which is, you're about, if you're a full-time player, it's like there's 25 guys playing full-time for every guy that makes it into that category. And so for every Shane, Feder, Filler, FSR, there are 20 or 30 guys that when people say, oh, it's better to be a full-time player now, they're thinking about Shane, FSR, Aloysius Yap. They're not thinking about, Justin Bergman, John Mora, Chris Melling. They're not thinking about, Mieszko Fortunski. They're not, there's so many full-time players that aren't good enough to get into that little top 10, 15 spots where they're getting that deep money. And so they're just out there grinding and existing. And so what the problem, there's so many. Mickey Krause. So here's what I'd say is that you have more people that are making it, but you also have many, many, many more people that are spending their entire life pursuing a game and not being able to make it. The number of people that are, no families, no houses, no careers, that are just existing from tournament to tournament with support and trying to sell lessons and raffle tickets just to keep existing from tournament to tournament to keep the dream alive, sharing hotel rooms and sleeping on air mattresses and just kind of like existing. The number of people that are just kind of like existing from tournament to tournament has probably gone from like 40 to like several hundred, 200, 300, 400. And so, yes, what I'm trying to say is when people look at it, they're like, well, there's more people making it. I'm like, yeah, but there's also more people starving. And so in some ways I could make the argument if we want to measure the success of pool as a profession by the number of people making it, it's gotten better. But if we want to measure pool as a profession by the number of people failing, I'd say there's more people failing now than ever before because of how tough it is and how deep it is. And so what do you think of that? Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Very accurate.
And it's just supply and demand. And so I actually was going to call this like the gelatus ratio. It's like for every, except I'm sure I didn't come up with this idea, so don't scratch that. But the point is, like, for every spot that you open up that offers somebody a living, you're going to have 10 guys chasing after it or 20 guys chasing after it. So there is no amount of money that you can dump into top pool that's going to suddenly make it a good career path, because for every spot that you open up, you're going to have 20 guys fighting for it, which means you're going to have 19 guys starving trying to get there. So how are you going to make that a good career path? Now, I'm going to rant for just a minute here. So then people say, well, but it should, I guess I would even argue with that. It should be a good career path to be in the top for pool. And I would say, pool, as a pool player, you're not offering any tangible service or value to the world. You're just a taker. And so the capitalism is a market, is free markets. It's like the idea that pool, the idea that if you get really good at, people have this assumption that if you get really good at a sport, it ought to pay you a living. But if everybody wanted to be a baseball player, how would the world turn? Like, that doesn't work. So obviously we only have room for a few people, and it's only the very, 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 very best, which means whatever. And then people say, oh, so the bottom line is, I don't think that pool owes you a living any more than if you invented a game of throwing rocks at a tin can and you got really, really good at that. You wouldn't be like, well, I ought to make a living out of this because I could throw rocks at a tin can. That owes me a living. It's like, no, you're not offering any value or goods or services to anybody. Why would it owe you a living? So I argue that pool is not an easier career path now than it used to be, because there's more. For every spot you open up, there's more people trying to get into it. I don't think that being one of the best in the world at something owes you a career. I think that I don't think that's the case. I think that this is not unique to pool. It's not, oh, well, look at golf. It's like, yeah, I think people are blinded by the people that are making good money in golf, and they don't see that, yeah, golf might pay more money to more people than pool, but they've got more and more and more people chasing it than pool does too. And so that's right. The same ratio. It's still, the bottom line is you can never, okay, so here's my closing statement on these. You can never, there's no sport where you can turn to a young boy and say, yes, this is a good career path for you, because they're all running into that same problem, which is ultimately supply and demand. There's so many people that love the idea of being able to play a game for a living, that there's so many people fighting for those spots, that it's always going to be a bad career path, because there's there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and maybe in the case of golf, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people willing to starve trying to get into that spot. So it's never going to be, oh, here's a great path to go down to get to the top. And so I don't think pool is a great career path. I don't think, no matter what they do, no matter how much money they add, no matter how many spots it pays, I don't think it's going to be a great career path because of that rule. And I don't think it should be. I don't think that pool or any sport owes you anything. If you're not providing a value or service to anybody, I think it's a weird statement to assume that that it should pay well. And then, okay. I lost my thought. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, no, I was, when you started that rant, that was the first thing that was already in my mind, was just the idea of providing value, like that's something that, like, when I was younger, I mean, I feel like I kind of understood it, but I didn't really understand it, and like there is no market that like owes you anything just because you're good at something. At the end of the day, it's you're in the free market, like you're trading your goods or services, right, for some sort of return, whether it be monetary value or whatever you're in it for, right? But that's just how it works. So there's not enough there's just not enough like supply to keep up with the demand, and
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
every market. So
And we all have this idea that we're the main character in a movie and that we are owed a special life and that we're so awesome and special that we ought to just be, but it's like we can't all be the special one. Everybody thinks they're
right.
special. You're unique just like everybody else. So the other thing I was going to say is I know some people are thinking, well, what about the influencers, the people that are making money by sharing their journey and selling raffle tickets and doing lessons? And if they can make a living that way, that's still an avenue that wasn't available 20 years ago. So there are more people. But listen, the problem is that's a short-term vacuum, or a short-term bubble. So when we look at 5-10 years down the road, remember, this is a fairly new market, this social media influencer pool player. And so right now, like 3 years ago, there was only a handful of players doing that. There was a few players that started a YouTube channel. There was a few players that started to become influencers. Now, I would bet the number of pool influencers has gone from like 10 to 20 in 2020 to probably 100 or 200 today, at least.
Yep.
And if we look forward 5 years and you say, hey, kids, this is what you do. You start your social media and you post clips of yourself practicing and you sell cue balls that are signed and jerseys and recommend jump cues and sell some raffle tickets and tell people where you're going. What happens when there's 2,000 people that are doing that, or even 500 or 1,000? At some point, there's only so much support to go around. And there's only, and so what I would say is anytime something opens up in the market, there is a short-term wave, and then that market gets full and saturated, and there's peaks and valleys. Now, I was in sales for 20 years, and I can tell you, I've seen waves come and go. I saw the waves that came and go after September 11th when they lowered interest rates and did all sorts of things. I saw the housing bubble come, and I saw the housing bubble go. I've been with different companies on the way up, and I've been with companies on the way down. I've seen peaks and valleys. It's not a static world. And so there are times when a market opens up, and for a short time, there's like, ooh, get in on this. This is pretty good. But the thing is, if you look poker, we saw poker in 2003 to 5, poker boomed. And from 2005 to 2010, there was a wave where if you played that game and got fairly good at it, you could find very easy money in poker. How long did that last? 5 to 10 years. And then you fast forward from 2007 to 2017, and players that were raking in money in 2007 could not even win anymore in 2017 because the market had been filled. Because it's like taking a bucket of water out of an ocean. You scoop the water out, there's a little hole, and all the other water fills it in. That's what free markets do. I will admit that after 2020, there was a little bit of a market hole where people could come in and use technology and, hey, I'm doing social media, I'm going to be an influencer. And there was a little boom, and that's booming. But I would say that, and we've seen this in so many other examples I could give, but it's filling in. That market's filling in. And if you're a young kid starting out that thinks that, hey, in 2-3 years, when I make a run at it, I'm going to be a social media influencer and it's going to be half my living, it's going to get saturated and it's going to get hyper competitive. And there's going to be more people playing, by the way. You're going to go from 250 full-time players that we know about to 500 to 1,000. And then they're all going to be trying to raffle tickets and social media their way in. It's going to get hyper competitive. And I'll tell you something, It's not glamorous, guys. It's not glamorous. I know it sounds fun. You know, they have pictures of themselves eating steak dinners with Alex Pagulayan. You're like, oh, that's the life. But what's not fun is to have to either not have kids and a family and a wife, or to look at your family and sit there and just be like heartbroken because you don't know how you're going to pay next month's rent and feed them. And you're like, I would trade all these dreams for the assurance that I could take care of my kid. Like, it's not glamorous, that kind of pressure. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's my first point, is that markets fill, and that market is a bubble, and that will fill. And the same thing is true with pool instruction. I do pool instruction. That's great. But I have to look ahead 5-10 years. It'll be a different market. And right now there was a little bit of a wave because COVID brought a lot of visibility. And there's a lot of pool players that started getting serious about pool post-COVID because they had more time. They had a table at home. They had a lot of technology, and they were able to see the pool world. And there was a big wave in serious amateurs. So there was a wave in serious amateurs starting pool after 2020, and a wave of influencers that were able to take advantage of that. And I just think that fast forward 5 years, it's going to be saturated, and there's going to be a lot of guys that are trying to sell clinics, and there's going to be a lot of guys trying to sell signed cue balls. And when you see thousands of them, they're not all going to be doing well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say about like the influencer idea is that even that alone, right? Like that's like we've because we talked about like things not being a meritocracy, right? Like what draws in support is like a person being a very good, like, influencer, as you say, instead of them being like potentially the next prospect of actually having a chance to make it. So because people are putting their dollars where they're not really getting much return other than just feeling like I'm helping out the person that I kind of like. Whereas, because you brought up poker, we both know that there's like plenty of platforms in poker that offer like staking, right? Where you can invest in players based on the idea that you see them improving and they're probably going to be one of the next, good players or something like that. So it's weird how that works too. And yeah, that does seem like it's become significantly more popular. I know you way back in the day did like that one tournament for Florida, right? Where you like raffled off a
Yeah.
percentages of to kind of raise money, and you have to explain it, but yeah, basically you do that, and then it's like that was like a one-off thing, but now that seems to be something you almost see on a daily basis on Facebook if you follow enough pool players. And again, I get why it works that way, and I'm not knocking it. It's just like you said, that market is filling, and it's filling fast, and there's only so much to go around. So it'll be interesting to see like kind of how that plateaus and eventually, you know, changes the landscape.
Yeah,
So
I think that's an interesting point. And so in this case, I would say that pool players are finally, the good news about social media. I don't mean to be doom and gloom. The good news is that pool players are able to offer value in a way that they weren't able to before, because before they were just strangers on YouTube. Now they are able to interact with an audience and connect with an audience to some level. And what that means is that there are, 100,000 amateur pool players that are able to latch onto a couple pool players that they're like, oh, I follow that guy. I like that guy. He seems cool. I root for him, kind of like you root for your own sports team. And then as a result of that, you don't mind supporting that player a little bit because you get to live through them, experience their highs. And when they win a tournament, you get to feel good. So it's almost like there's a huge audience that's willing to directly pay just a little bit to the players to kind of have somebody to root for and feel like they have a little part of that person's mission. They get to live vicariously through their journey. And so pool players are actually then offering more than just passive entertainment. They're offering some type of emotional connection and some type of share in their journey. So pool players are actually providing a value they weren't able to before. I just think it's going to become quickly saturated, as we talked about. So it'll be interesting to see as 2 to 5 times more people get into the game over the next 5 years. And as the number of players that are 770 plus goes from, at the US Open, goes from 80 to where in 5 or 6 years, it might be that's 200. And then it's going to get weird, man. It's going to get cartoonishly deep. The talent's going to get cartoonishly deep. That also means that the number of players that are able to make consistent runs, boy, right now you've got the same, you still somehow have a few guys that are able to pretty consistently get deep in these tournaments, but these are races to 9. And as the number of 800s goes from 30 to 100 or 200, it's going to get harder and harder for guys to consistently make the money or get deep in these tournaments. It'll be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Yeah,
I just wouldn't encourage anybody to tell their 8-year-old to go all in on pool. That's all.
I agree. Yeah, it's interesting, man. Um, I feel like even in that topic, like there's a lot of routes we could go, but it's kind of just saying the same types of thing over and over, just getting more detailed on
Yeah,
it.
just
But
turning it, looking at it from different ways. Yeah.
yeah, but it is fascinating, like because I mean you're older than me, but we've both experienced pool in a very similar ways, just at like slightly different times, and then also like an overlap. So it's interesting that we have like slightly different perspectives on pool, but it always kind of comes back to the same place.
Well, but we've also seen things change, and we saw poker rise and fall. I mean, not fall, but like we saw poker rise and then get to the point where it's darn tough. Um, the difference with that though is that poker is not handicapped. So let me change the subject. I got one more thought on my mind. Well, I'm
Okay.
making enemies.
Well,
Today's
I'm
my
using
day.
the bathroom while you're firing it off. So, but I
Okay.
think I know where you're gonna go. So if you want to
Okay.
wait, you can. Otherwise, go ahead.
No problem.
All right. Sorry, I couldn't hold it any longer.
No problem. Okay. A couple things too I wanted to close before we move to the next topic. Okay, let me start that again because I'm gonna edit this out anyway. So let me try that again. One other thing that I've heard people say that to be fair, I do agree with. There are people that say, how is pool in general? Just not the livelihood of pool, but just the game itself. The game is getting bigger. The game is getting more established. So the chances that if we came back in 50 years, that pool would be gone off the face of the earth. I mean, there's games that have fallen to the wayside. People don't play anymore, but pool seems like it's thriving. And so at least the pastime of pool is going to be preserved because of the growth of the game. And so that is probably true, at least for the short term. And we're all going to, eventually the sun's going to blow up. But the other thing that people say is that from a entertainment standpoint, and for being able to for being an amateur who wants to watch pro pool, who enjoys watching top players compete, and then being able to connect with them on social media and be closer to the pros and be able to share in their journeys from the perspective of like the entertainment of pool. They'd say pool has never been better in terms of the game being established and the experience of being a fan. And so from that experience, I will say pool's never been better. And as there's never been a better time to be a pool fan than there is today. And that the game, at least we know, is going to be around. Odds are that you're going to be able to teach your kids how to play pool and it'll still be a game. So I've heard people say, in terms of the health of the game and from the consumer standpoint, it's really, really good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Demetrius Gelatis here with Minnesota Pool Bootcamp. We live in an age with abundant information about pool, but without organization and direction, it doesn't translate into bottom line results. I've been coaching full-time for over 6 years, and I've guided more than 200 students step by step to higher levels of pool. Now I've partnered with Slate Billiard Club to provide online group coaching and make our training available to players everywhere. No travel necessary. Join us online for just $19.95 a month. You'll get access to my Minnesota Pool Bootcamp playbook, covering cue ball, pattern play, mental game, and the common leaks that people have in applying this to get their game to the next level. The best part is I'll be there working with you every step of the way to give you the direction you need to see results right away. Okay, one last thing I want to chat about. This has been on my mind. And I hesitate to use this as an analogy because it's, I'm going to just touch this. I'm not going to get into this, but I've thought about the balance. I wanted to talk about social regulation when it comes to pool. And the what came to mind, specifically like when it comes to handicaps, when it comes to Fargo caps, when it comes to different divisions, how groups of people regulate pool. And what came to my mind is I've heard it said that in the market, looking at the free market, that there's a balancing act going on. Because if you allow the free market to operate with no regulation, then you're going to end up with 5 people and 5 companies that own everything, destroy the earth, and everyone else is going to be working in the salt mines. But if you eliminate private property and have it so that, there's just no incentives for people to provide values or services, there's no rewards for people to work hard or contribute, and that there's no accountability or no penalty for people sitting on their hands, that system might not always work either. And so there's, however you think about it, there's always this balance between the market creating incentives to drive production and some type of regulation to keep it so that you don't have massive tycoon monopolies that destroy the planet and shut everybody else out. There's a balancing act between the two. And I thought about that in terms of pool and how we regulate pool as a group of humans. Because on the one hand, people they say that you want to see top players rewarded. We have stories. We have a story that says people that excel, people that are great, people that sacrifice and work hard and are disciplined and determined and that develop themselves and become the best version of themselves and can outcompete and outperform everybody else around them. That's awesome. That's great. That's heroic. That's what we aspire to. And those people should be recognized and rewarded. That's a true statement that people believe. But then there's another statement, which is, but I mean, we all live lives and not everybody can do that. And everybody ought to have a chance to where in their own lives, even if they're not the most heroic and the most disciplined and the most amazing, everybody ought to have some type of chance to where they can be competitive and they can be important and they can have their own moment to experience some type of success in their lives. So those are two statements that just smash into each other.
Yeah.
And we've talked about and it sounds like, good players griping about handicaps. That's not what this is. I'm just fascinated by how humans regulate this because that's what it is. We've got, instead of government regulation or instead of, instead of markets, there's like market forces and then there's social regulation where when I think about like what handicaps are and what Fargo caps are and what divisions are and even leagues, what the league structures are is, hey, if we don't do something, there's going to be like a few guys that just beat everybody at everything and everybody else is going to just get shut out and feel like crap. So we need to create sub pockets where, different divisions or different leagues or different structures, we have to create opportunity because we need to make sure everybody has a chance to feel like they can compete and be successful in different ways at different times in their life.
Right.
But then we still like this idea that we want heroes and we want those heroes to point the way and inspire us all. And it's, to me, all of these divisions and handicaps are just social regulations trying to figure out how to balance the two out. And just like in the capitalism world, the people that run companies think that the government's regulating them too much, and the people that are working in Amazon pissing into a bottle because they can't afford to stop at a bathroom break because they got so many deliveries to make, they think that the CEO is making too much. So the same way that those forces argue in the market, you've got those forces at play in the pool world, and it's interesting. So that's kind of my premise, is that like I'm starting to kind of look at that almost like very parallel to what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it is true. And it like you said, in the real world, the tricky part is that when you talk about like the dilemma where they're like, well, we kind of have to find a way to balance this so the same people aren't winning all the time. That, like, when you hear that, it sounds like it's from the perspective of the players, but it's really not. It's from the perspective of how do we keep this sustainable to maximize, our profits at the end for this. and that's the real discussion that's being had. But it sounds like you're still talking about what's in the best interest for the players. And until that becomes like the center of the not of even the discussion, the center of like the whole drive for doing whatever's being done, then I just don't ever see it changing, you know? So that like just an idea is like, or so many people are starting up, tours and leagues and over the past, decade or two, right? And if you really look at the direction they all go, they never end up in a good place for like diehard pool players, because for whatever truth is behind it, the pool players don't spend any money. They're, whatever. They're not good for business. I'm not really sure what all the reasons are, right? But it always just ends up being how can we draw in new players and basically forget about the existing customers or guys who have been like long-term customers and and just like grow our numbers. That's all it really is at the end, right? I mean, the APA is like a perfect example of that, right? They like de-incentivize players becoming good pool players because as you get better, they like you don't have to separate your team because you want new players. It's because you're literally too good to stay together as a team. And that's a genius business model, of course, right? It works out very well for them and they're not going anywhere. But as far as like breeding like, the best level pool players that they can get out of their league, it just doesn't happen. Because once you get too good, there's like, yeah, like you're out of here. They've kicked out players for winning their nationals too much, right? So it is what it is. What the actual fix for that is, uh, in my opinion, is it basically has to be you have to fill all gaps in that market, right? So you have to fill something for wherever the Fargo rate cutoff is, whether it be 600 to probably all the way up to like 770, right? There has to be enough supply for those people to still be able to want to play pool and remain competitive without just saying, hey, there's like this limbo area where because the market there is so small, we're not going to worry about it and we're not going to have the bottom parts of the market feed into that in any way. Just because we would rather, cut that out and not deal with complaints and continue to run our business as is. But just in my opinion, I want you to kind of, hop in on this too inevitably that's just is a race to the bottom because once you have another 5 6 years of these Fargo rates 675 and belows, those guys who are 675s now and like really involved in the game, eventually when you're done playing pool, I mean they're just going to fizzle out, and then players are not going to work hard to get up to even 675 because why would they want to?
Yeah, you're
Like
just going to
I
create
started
another.
pool.
You're just going to create another bubble. That's all you're going to do.
Exactly. And,
Create
and we've
another
talked about
bubble.
this in other podcasts too, of course. But if I could reset my Fargo rate, I would never play a Fargo rate tournament. Like I would just wait for the good tournaments to come
So,
around and then
so here's what I think. There's a few different ways that we can have. When we talk, we could be complaining, we could just be
Mhm.
describing, or we could try to solve, or we could be trying to influence and change. I'll
Yeah.
tell you what. I'm not complaining, but I will tell you something else. I'm very not interested in. I have zero interest in trying to change the landscape. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you why. I'm just describing. The reason I'm describing is because they say that I talk about this all the time when I coach pool. There's what you can control and there's what you can't control. I don't care about the things I can't control. I'm not going to try to change the things I can't change. You have to have the courage to change the things you can, the serenity to accept the things you can't, and then the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
What to me is when I'm talking about the things I can't control, I'm not complaining about them. I'm just trying to understand the landscape of what is going on so that I can control the things I can control. So what I can control, where do I play? When do I play? Why do I play? Well, how much do I play? I can't control I mean, the human tribe. I can't control human behavior. I can't control human nature, and humans as a tribe, like what actually steers and regulates pool. It's like you can say, well, the league directors or the tournament directors, but they're responding to the market forces. And
Mm.
each person that has their own opinion, and each person that says, "Well, I would never play that if I so and so just steals it all the time. I'm not going to play that tournament." Or every player that says, "I'm willing to take a shot at that," because everybody casts their vote, and they do it decision by decision by decision. Every player casts a tiny vote with what they're willing to participate in and what they're willing to support. Meanwhile, the people that are running things
are just responding to those thousands and thousands and thousands of votes coming in and constantly steering things around based on what those people want. And so there's a ton of instability because there's a ton of different forces at work. People play for different reasons. Very few people play for money. People play for social validation, and people play for the personal satisfaction of, achievement. And so that means if people aren't getting validation and success and achievement, that they tend to kind of like shy away from it. And if people are getting those things, they tend to get excited and support it. And so the problem is there's only by definition, if you get 32 people in a tournament, you can only have a few people that are like the winners. So therefore you have to find ways to make sure that, and there's a certain like dopamine release schedule. There's a certain number of wins that people need to keep being interested in participating in the contest. So without knowing it, like the tournament directors and league directors are just responding, trying to find a way to get enough people, enough success, enough of the time to keep them engaged and shifting and bobbing. And then everyone's playing tug of war with where those Fargo caps are and where the handicaps are. And in the middle of it all, now I look at all this and for whatever reason, it doesn't work for me. So I am like, I'm not, nothing wrong with people that are autistic. I'm not saying I'm autistic, but like certain things in my brain. And I think for you too, like, it's just like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. Like I want clean rules. I want anybody can go play. You get what you get. Like that's how I want to play. And that doesn't exist in the amateur world right now. And so at least not in, in my region. And so what happens then is the reason I don't play handicap tournaments or all these things is because to me, I don't like that system. I don't like this murky, slidey tug of war system where basically I can be playing better than everybody in the room, but then a bunch of, talking gorillas can get together in a band and say, no, we want to say we won. So we're just going to pretend you missed that last shot so that you're eliminated. We're going to say that we get to keep going because it's our turn to win. Like, I don't want to be voted off of a pool tournament because other people feel like I've won too many matches. Like, it just doesn't feel right to me. And so people can, I'm not saying they're wrong to do that because obviously the majority speaks and the majority is going to do what they're going to do. But like, to me, it just feels like it doesn't work for me. So then I just have to know that that's how the amateur pool works. And then that's how a pool works pretty much everywhere, except for like the open professional tournaments. And so then I'm not trying to change it, Jesse. I just find it fascinating to like look at how it works. And the more I look at how it works, the more I'm like, yeah, I don't want to play that game. I like to play pool. I'll just play pool because I enjoy the game, and I'll play where I can show up and play. And if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. And as it is, that turns out to be not that many tournaments. But I just find it interesting to like try to understand what the forces are at play and how they're shuffling around. And it's kind of absurd watching thousands and thousands of pool players, pool tournament directors and league operators in different directions, trying to like give people, what I mean, enough breadcrumbs to continue participating in the system. And when you kind of see it for what it is, it's kind of like interesting.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Yeah, and I think, I mean, because you and I have had like endless hours of conversation on this stuff outside of a podcast, we're both probably, I mean, I feel like we're both very much in the same, boat here. Like we understand we had our times where we definitely were complaining about it, and then like we just had to make peace with what pool actually is or what the, where it's really heading, and then just kind of decide our each individual path, like what we want out of pool. And like you said, you do pretty well with coaching, and then you just kind of choose your tournaments that you feel like you can go be somewhat competitive in, take your shot. You don't have to deal with underrated handicaps, whatever, that kind of crap. And you go play and you enjoy it. And
And I think the big
where I'm at
thing,
too,
I think the big thing is that I felt, and I think a lot of top players feel real jaded or betrayed because when you're an upcoming pool player, see, you only hear one half the story. People point to the heroes. People point to Shane Van Boning and they say, now Shane Van Boning, that's a pool player. He's one of the best in the world. He was the best and greatest of all time. That we admire that. That's what you should do if you play pool. And then they talk about the good players around town. They're like, so-and-so, they're the best around. If you ever watch them play bar table A ball, man, they play good. They run every rack. I saw them run 7 racks one time against so-and-so. And, it's like, yeah. And so you hear people talk about the top players. And you hear people kind of put them on a pedestal and talk about them like, those were our heroes. That's what you should aspire to. And if you go do that, the world will recognize you and reward you. But what you don't see is the other half, which is
what they don't say, which is where they don't play the tournaments where that guy's playing because they don't want to lose again, and where they tell their tournament director, yeah, I didn't sign up. Why didn't you sign up, Tom? Well, I'll tell you, Carl, that so and so is just going to win it again. I just soon keep my money, and if there's something you have that's the lower rated, then I'll jump in. All those little conversations that they have that tell the other side of the story, which is, yeah, we'll put those guys on pedestals and talk about those traits as heroic and inspiring, but then here's how we actually behave in our day-to-day life, which is, yeah, we don't want to lose to them again and again. So, but when when I was a young kid, I just heard the first half of the story, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's the guy you want to be. Let's go get that. That sounds cool. And so the whole story is it's almost like it's almost like I don't want to it's like you could say it's almost like if a Christian that was like looking at Christ as a icon and a role model, and like, this is what you aspire to. But then there's certain people that live their lives in ways where they might feel uncomfortable because they're like, well, but I can't live up to those standards, and I don't want to feel hypocritical or bad about myself. So, why don't we all just, I don't know. It's weird, man. Like there's a lot of forces at play. And anyway, it's tough, man. I just didn't understand when I was a kid, because I think, maybe I'm a little bit, and I think the people that tend to get pretty good at pool are the people that followed that path and believe that story to some extent. And I guess I felt tricked because I didn't know the whole story. And now that I know the whole story, I feel much less conflicted. I feel much less bitter about it. And sitting back and looking at the way these things ebb and flow and the way they play out, I'm just like, what a weird group of people. I mean, but it probably makes sense. It's like, it's just humans. It's probably optimal. It probably shouldn't change, Jesse. It's probably optimal because somehow or other, all these market forces are allowing enough people to get enough of everything that they want to where it works. And it may not give me and you as many chances to compete and win as we'd like. But, again, it's kind of like in some cases, I kind of feel like, for a lot of people listening to the podcast, they might be like, yeah, we're like the guy with $100 billion complaining about, government regulation. It's like, yeah, we may not like it, but in the end, pool's done a lot for us, and we've been rewarded quite a bit for our effort. And so it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. I just thought it was fun to kick around a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, no, in general, the world is never really going to be like super comfortable for people who are just extremists. I mean, like, you're always the outlier, and you have to find a way. It's tricky, right? Like there's all the sayings, like, it's lonely on top, right? But it's also lonely on the bottom if you're like in the weird spot. So I mean, you have to find a way to be comfortably uncomfortable with being that type of human being, and who doesn't follow with the masses and just like look for like eternal comfort, because otherwise you're just going to drive yourself crazy. And I think that's the hardest thing for people who are like aspiring pool players or anything that's similar to that path, to really make peace with.
I heard it said that it's kind of like when species evolve, when they mutate, the vast majority of mutations are not adaptively beneficial. So most mutations are net negatives and die out of the gene pool. And only very occasionally is there like one mutation that's actually a beneficial survival trait that might end up being reinforced and possibly become the mainstream. I've heard it said that with humans that you have like a bell curve where most people are kind of like normal. And then you've got some like mutants with people that have a little bit different, whether you call it personality or the way that their minds work, or with different whatever character traits or whatever. I've heard it said that certain people are a little bit of outliers, and that you need the outliers as like experiment to figure out either they can either like different artists or different people contribute to society in some different ways, and then a lot of those things turn out not to be very useful. And so anyway, what I heard was something like, you have the outliers are necessary to contribute and help kind of like test the fringes a little bit to see which direction, or if there's anything to be added, or any contributions or nudges to the social conversation. But that a lot of those people, even if a lot of them are not useful, and even if they are, it's never comfortable and easy to be the outlier. And so in the end, it's kind of like there's a few mutants among the human race that are necessary to kind of test the fringes, and but you're never gonna fit in. So yeah, that's it. And I can't figure out, maybe I'm the mutant that maybe I've got something positive to contribute to pool, or maybe I'm the guy that's going to get bred out because I'm a genetic dead end. But either way, it's been a fun ride. So
For sure. Well, yeah, I mean, just being on in the part that you can be self-aware about it though is that just means a lot, you know. It's like you're not still like living some delusional dream that you're going to be the best, right? Then we'd have problems. So,
oh, you don't know. I'm practicing every night. I'm dreaming of this game, Fat Man, every day on the road.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting landscape, man. Cool.
Yeah, it's a fun one, man. But it's a good time to be a fan. So for all the people, I support all the people that love this game. I would just say I think it's a tough time to get into pool. It's a tough time to want to be an influencer. It's an even tougher time to want to be a professional competitor. I would not necessarily encourage my kid to try to follow this path. But as I've heard, as my students have told me, and I agree, it's never been a better time to be a fan. It's never been a better time to watch, and so it's still a heck of a fun game to play. So with that in mind, Jesse, do you have any tournaments coming up on your calendar?
No, we're probably just gonna. Well, we still got to get home here, so we're probably gonna
Yeah,
start heading home within the next couple days.
yeah. Congratulations again.
Yeah. I think I'll probably play, some for us regional, within a half day's drive, right? So I'll probably pick up a couple tournaments within the next, 3 or 4 months, but nothing too crazy.
Are you going to go to some of those? So the Cue It Up tour, Michael Taylor is running the Cue It Up tour. What's
Yep.
cool about that is they're bar table events, but they're non-handicapped, and they're tiered entries, which I think is awesome.
Yep.
I have no problem with tiered entries. I think that's a great idea. So I wanted to shout out to Michael Taylor and the Cue It Up tour. It's really cool, and I think I'll play a couple of those as well. So maybe we should chat about that.
For sure. Yeah, I just saw that flyer like right before we hopped on the Zoom, and I screenshotted it. So I'll probably pick a couple of those, especially.
I'll text you. I've got a couple of those I got my eye on. So
Yeah. So
cool.
All right.
All right, Jesse. Well, thanks, man. It's good to talk to you. I'll take care until next time.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you.